So, I was thinking to myself, as I looked at the reading for today, that perhaps I should have read a little ahead in the scriptures when I made my decision to preach from the Old Testament this summer. Amos, man. Good old Amos, right? And I have to admit that, asking yourself the question of what is the Spirit trying to say to God's people at this time and in this moment and in this place, I was really asking myself another question. Now what? And so I sat with what was given to me, and it was a memory. When I was a kiddo, my summers were spent in northern Michigan. My summer life was balanced under the guidance of my grandparents, John and Doris. Mornings were for chores and projects. That's what they were for. My job was, in fact, to help prepare for the coming winter. Yes, even in June and July. I was to chop firewood and stack it, right? Sometimes I got to clean the moss off of the roof of the cabin. I got to stuff the cabin logs where they had split with this tarry rope called oakum. It was a natural way to seal the cracks in the cedar logs. I was given the task of glazing window panes with putty, right? And paint. Lord have mercy. Paint the shed, paint the trim, paint the railings, paint everything, and get it good and thick on there, right? Paint, stain, and you guessed it, chop more firewood. That was the morning. But the afternoons, there was a balance, like I said. The afternoons was, they were for the lake. They were for penny candy that you could still get at the general store that was down the road. They were for these things that my grandmother Doris used to call treat trays, which essentially was this old silver tray that was piled high with cuts of summer sausage, pimento cheese, and peaches. Dinner was almost always sweet corn from the surrounding farms with enough butter on it to make Paula Deen blush, right? And then, of course, after dinner, there was the trip to the Dairy Queen. Peanut butter parfait. Yeah, buddy. To tell you the truth, the taste of my summers, of my youth, well, they seem to only exist in my memory now. I don't know if I went to Dairy Queen and I got a peanut butter parfait if it would taste the same as it did when I was 12. Probably not. But they exist in my memory as if tucked away in a cornucopia of blessing, as sheltered, sort of, from the ravages of time. Do you have memories like that? Untouched? Unblemished? They're kept almost, I think. These memories with a sense of satisfaction that I think could only be equated with the term contentment, that we might describe as full. And this fullness brings to mind another memory, that of the baskets of produce my mother used to bring in from her garden. Thick tomatoes, heaps of scallions, string beans, and enough squash, right, to have it at every meal, even breakfast. But don't worry, we didn't do that. We weren't that weird, okay? Yeah, lunch and dinner maybe. And these memories that I believe God was giving me to hold on to reveal more to me now than I realized. These memories don't just speak to a piece of my youth, peace in the sense of P-E-A-C-E, that peace that's somehow now far removed, but to the fact that we were rich and we didn't even know it. And I think to myself, what did we do with all of that? What did we do with all of that abundance from the earth? We shared it. We shared it in our neighborhoods. And you know what? We couldn't even give it away. You know what I'm talking about, right? Some neighbors would be appreciative when you showed up with a sack of squash, right? They'd be like, thank you, right? But others would take that grocery sack and they would ask the question to themselves, what am I supposed to do with all of this? Not in some snide way, but them, I think, really thinking to themselves, are there that many recipes for squash? And what was remarkable in those summer months is just as much as we gave, that was returned in kind. We'd come out and there'd be sacks of cherries, maybe, wild berries from the field behind our house, melons, and peaches. Is there anything finer than a summer peach? I don't know. Today marks 44 years for me, and the memories of those days surely remind me of a basket of summer fruit, the kind that Amos mentions. They remind me of the time that I've been given, what I've done with that time, and the time that is before me, which in all of the conversations that you and I have had together has revealed that time seems to speed up as we grow up. And maybe that's why John Milton said that time was the subtle thief of youth. Because I did grow up. We all did. And now we look back and ask, like we don't know, where has all the time gone? And this passing of time has taught me something, my friends. That summer fruit is ripe. And it is as ripe as the time is before us all. When we wake up in the mornings and are greeted with images of marketplaces, schools, and even places of worship being turned into rubble, where joyous gatherings have become funeral processions, I find myself straining to hear the peace of birdsong and the feel of that summer sun that I once knew. Sometimes, in that moment, it is only silence. And the silence is not a silence of peace, mind you, but rather a kind of stunned grief sometimes. And thus the silence that Amos calls for in his prophecy is reverent. Because it's an acknowledgement that things have gone terribly wrong in that kingdom. And what is more, that no words by themselves, can fix it. And the temptation for me, I guess, in reading those words and trying to apply them to my life Well, I guess the temptation is to retreat to my memory and there be captivated by its specter. Because there, beholden to that beautiful summer sun, I am no good. Useless, perhaps. There in my memory, when the systems before me trample the needy in place and in name of efficiency, when currencies are manipulated, and when even, as Amos says, the sweepings of wheat, when everything in our life is for sale, and what is more, that we know it. I think it's there that Amos points to God. Maybe Amos is not wagging his finger at the people of the northern kingdom so much as he is pointing to God, a God who stands before all as a witness, asking us not to live chained to our memory, even if those memories themselves are rich, but to feel deeply within ourselves the call to respond to the injustices of our time. And the surest sign that we are facing that time is found in what we answer when asked, "What brings you joy?" If you have to stop and think about that, that says something. It's when you notice that joy has turned to grief, more than you care to admit, and when celebration is often followed closely by lamentation. It's when you're not surprised by the following juxtapositions. That there seems to be an intellectual famine and a time of endless information. That people scroll endlessly, craving meaning, and yet they find only noise. When religious language is co-opted by politics or reduced to cliché, we have a grace period for you. And when people wander through the milieus of medias, podcasts, and punditry, searching for moral clarity, only to grow more lost. And all the while, God, Amos says, is shouting. And for some reason, we do not hear him. We must, church, choose the better part and make it our mission to hear. For the words of the prophet still ring true, and that's because the human heart still yearns for justice, and God's concern for the poor has not faded. I think, my friends, it has only intensified. And thus our distractions must be given over to God in prayer, and we must do the work that has been given us to do while it is still day. The challenge before us remains that the church is to refuse to be complicit in the injustices that beset a great many of God's children. And it is to restore then the word and witness of the Lord, not only in our mouths, but in our lives. And no act of humility, no act of forgiveness or grace is too small in that endeavor. For it is in practicing these things that the time that has been given to us bends itself towards mercy, and eternity has the opportunity to bloom in the quiet folds of the present. One where God might look at us and say, I choose to remember your sin no more.